Welcome to the most important podcast in the world. I'm your host, Reese Wood, and on this episode, most important moment number 6, we're going to talk about an upcoming event for Phil Anderson, former guest from episode number 2. Go back, check it out. And Phil is running for U.S. Senate, and in Wisconsin, he's going to have this event. It's going to be Janesville. Of course, I'm going to be there, but Janesville, 5 p.m. at Max Pizza, December 2nd. And if you're looking for the location, it's on the screen, whichever way, I don't know which side it's on. But those are the deets. And if you're looking for the event, it's on Facebook. If not, just contact me and I'll shoot you the location. Milton Avenue, I don't know the exact location, I should know. But December 2nd, 5 p.m., Max Pizza. Suppose you could Google it. But meet Phil. He's running for Senate in 2024 as a libertarian and under the slogan, Disrupt the Corruption. Quite a slogan. And if you're a traditional party member, that might sound a little outside your parameters. Disrupt the corruption. What is he talking about? You're going to have to meet him and find out, or go back to episode number 2 and find out a little bit there. So, Phil is someone who originally inspired me, amongst other things that were going on at the time, in 2018 when I ran for state assembly. But just by being present in prior elections, just by being someone who was there, and That's like such a simple, low bar, right? Just by being in an election. Some people would say that's a low bar. Let me tell you why that's not, especially for a third party or an independent person. When you try to get in an election, you'll find that the two traditional parties do have infrastructure. They usually have someone ready to run, or a list of candidates ready to run in any given election. Sometimes, especially in Wisconsin, we see unopposed elections. No one choosing to run, the incumbent being unopposed. So when a third-party person, when an independent shows up in any given election, it definitely stands out. But when you look closer, when you take that microscopic view and look in at the candidate, the person trying to get on the ballot, you'll find out that they usually have a small team. They don't have a big team of support or volunteers. I'm trying to think of the last time someone, an independent or third-party person in Wisconsin, was like a lawyer or a wealthy person who started with lots of support. You don't see that a lot. And I believe there are a lot of people that perceive that that's what third-party and independent people might be, that they're people of wealthy nature that are trying to be outsiders in an election. But the truth is, most people that are independent or third-party, at least in Wisconsin that I've seen, myself included, are low budget. They're not going to barely compete with the big money that shows up from the two traditional parties. And a lot of that is due to infrastructure. But, so like I said, when those types of people show up, you notice it. Myself definitely was inspired by Phil and other candidates, other third-party and independent people around the 2015, 2016, 17 time. But Phil was a former Beloiter, and so that definitely registered on my radar as something significant, something different. And so I reached out to him way back then, and he was an easy guy to get a hold of. And I've said this before. Phil's probably saying, Reese, you say this too much. But try to reach out to any other candidate in any given election, Republican or Democrat, and try to get them to personally message you back or offer their phone number or to be able to meet up with you. Chances are very narrow, very small. But Phil is not one of those people, very easy to get a hold of. always willing to talk about issues that I feel some Democrats and some conservatives would not be willing to have. And for that reason, like I said, he was an inspiration then, remains an inspiration. You guys definitely take the opportunity if you get a chance. He's got this event. There's other ones as well. Make sure to follow his page on Facebook and elsewhere, Phil Anderson for U.S. Senate. But so not to say too much, because we said a lot in episode 2. And I could tell you after that episode, even knowing Phil personally, there's so much more that I'd like to ask him. And so if you guys are like me and you're always looking for everything going on in a given election, any election, and you're a voter in Wisconsin, definitely consider your options and try to reach out to Phil or any third party or independent candidates that are already working. There's very few of those out there. Phil might be the only one. I could be wrong. Definitely been wrong about some things. But to get in an election as an independent or third party candidate is not easy. You have to start early, and you can't collect those signatures, but you definitely have to do what you can to start early, especially if you don't have the big bucks to compete. You got to get out there and do what you can as a person. And so all of these things stand out huge for me. And hopefully they do for you too. And that episode 2, just one of my favorite moments in podcasting. I walked away immediately after that podcast telling myself, I should have asked this. I should have said this. There's more chances. Plenty time left for that. But I do want to kind of segue this into other stuff, podcasting, and what's most important about podcasting for me. We had an episode, one of the most recent ones, with Joe Stoffaker, staying on the libertarian topics, and completely threw me off because I was not prepared. I didn't throw Joe any questions ahead of time. Usually I do. I have questions for most guests, and I get a week, sometimes more, to prepare. Sometimes these are people that, like Phil, I'm aware of and I have good questions for. But I didn't have them for Joe. And so if you catch that in the early part of that episode, way thrown off. But what we got into were topics of all kinds that I'm interested in. And so if you're watching this, if you've thought about doing a podcast of your own, or just being a guest, maybe you have a small story, a big story, a series of stories. Maybe you want to talk about your favorite Christmas, your favorite holiday of any kind, or a profession, something you do. And it could be anything. I love stories of all kinds. I love talking to people. But for me, it's all about perspective and gaining those things that I think some people do overlook, the small things we get in a conversation with someone. And that's what's great about podcasting. You get, at least for me, I get to edit and re-listen to what someone said, especially myself. Man, is that a treat. You get to listen to people. And yes, you get to listen to yourself. You get to learn from it. And you gain additional perspective and insight that you wouldn't in that initial conversation or that initial engagement. And so hearing something twice, hearing something 3-4 times in an edit, you will retain it kind of like when you write something down. And to me, it's amazing because I think a lot of people are overlooking the significance. We have technology that sometimes people say is not useful, not helpful. And I definitely agree. There are aspects of technology that are not helpful. But one thing we do as people that technology helps us with, that as people we don't always nail it, is listening and communicating in general. And that's me, especially me. I don't always hear stuff right the first time, and I don't say things right the first time always. But podcasting gives us that second chance, gives us more than a second chance. And so just something to think about. And it's definitely one of the things, one of the ideas that inspired me to do this podcast. Also, the first podcast I did, the Beloit podcast, just wanting to hear someone's perspective. And we got that with Joe. Joe talked about so many things in that episode that resonated with me. I said I had to let him know in the episode, Joe, these things resonate with me. But I was thrown off that he was able to talk about things that really did resonate with me so well. And things like the health implications of technology and some of the industrial things that we're doing with our environment in Wisconsin. Some of the pipelining and the internet pipelining, things that we do energy related. And we talked about the unintended consequences that come from some of those things. We talked about 5G. A lot of people, I know, after COVID and leading up to COVID said 5G is a conspiratorial topic. But myself personally, it's not too much of a stretch to say that there are implications that possibly we're not aware of yet, or that we're slowly coming around to health implications, adverse health implications from technology. It's definitely a possibility. And to say it's not, I don't know if that's productive. But, so we talked about those things. We talked about the Libertarian Party. We talked about the funding that goes to the two traditional parties when they secure ballot access, and how the independent and third parties don't get that same funding because they don't always secure the ballot access. They don't always perform well enough in elections in terms of votes and voter outcome. So we talked about all kinds of interesting stuff, but I want to get into all kinds of other topics and anything at all. We definitely have had our share of comedians so far, and we have more coming up. So if you love comedy, definitely, we got some episodes coming up. But all kinds of stuff. And we're just getting started, and there's no end in sight that I can see. This podcast is my excuse to keep podcasting, just between you and all the viewers and me and the world. This is Reese Wood's Excuse to Podcast, and I hope you guys enjoy it. But I'm going to not keep you too much longer here. Like I said, December 2nd, Janesville, 6 p.m. Phil Anderson, U.S. Senate candidate. And I'll be there. But join us. Hope you enjoyed this episode. See you on the next one. Thanks for your support.